On the morning of February 13th, 2019, 12 Army Special Forces soldiers found a survivor sitting on their extraction route. Negative 18 degrees. He had been missing in a blizzard for 8 days. No coat, no gloves, no boots. He was calm. He knew his own name. He knew all 12 of theirs. Nobody had told him. When the medic lifted him onto the stretcher, the medic staggered. Not from the weight, from the absence of it. At the hospital, on a calibrated scale, witnessed by 2 physicians and a state trooper, the survivor weighed 19 pounds. And the only thing he asked them, the only thing he ever asked, each man, one at a time, by name, politely, was whether they had anything to eat. To understand what was sitting on that trail, you have to start where I started, with the file. Case file 0692. Classification restricted. Distribution none. Filed March 11th, 2019 by Field Agent Redacted. Subject: loss of 4 civilian survey personnel and subsequent recovery operation. National Forest, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. Attachments: 1 medical annex, 1 audio recording, duration 14 minutes, 6 seconds. There is a handwritten note in the top right corner of the cover sheet. Blue ink. Different handwriting than the filing agent's. It says, "Do not play the recording alone." This is Dr. Tales. The following file was read into the record on the date you are hearing it. I did not write it. I am only reading it. Section 1. Summary of Incident. On February 6th, 2019, a 4-man civilian survey crew contracted by a logging company failed to make their scheduled radio check from a remote timber parcel in the Redacted National Forest. Weather at the time was a sustained blizzard, 41 inches of snow over 3 days, temperatures between -11 and -26 degrees Fahrenheit. County Search and Rescue attempted access on February 8th and turned back. On February 9th, the county sheriff requested state assistance. The request was routed to the Michigan National Guard. What happened next is the reason this file exists. The unit that responded was not a standard Guard element. A 12-man Special Forces detachment from the Redacted Special Forces Group, Army National Guard, was conducting winter warfare training 90 miles south at the time. They were the only qualified personnel within reach who could move through that terrain on skis and snowshoes in those conditions and survive. They were retasked for search and rescue on the morning of February 10th. 12 men went into the tree line. 12 men came out. That is not the problem. The problem is what they carried out with them. Section 2. The missing. The survey crew consisted of 4 men. Their names are redacted in my copy, so I will use their titles. The crew chief, age 54. 2 surveyors, ages 31 and 28, and a trainee, age 22. The trainee had been on the job for 9 days. Their camp was well supplied. This matters. Write it down if you have to. They carried food for 14 days. 2 heated wall tents, 300 gallons of stove fuel cached at the site, a generator, a satellite phone, which was later recovered, fully charged, powered off, inside its case, at the bottom of a duffel bag. Under the duffel bag's other contents, as if it had been packed away on purpose. The crew chief had 30 years of backcountry experience. In his personnel file, his employer wrote 1 sentence that the filing agent underlined twice. He does not make mistakes in the woods. The last radio check came on the evening of February 5th. The crew chief spoke to the logging company dispatcher for 40 seconds. Routine traffic. Weather, fuel status, work completed. Then, at the end of the call, off script, he said one more thing. The dispatcher logged it because she did not know what else to do with it. He said, "Tell the day shift the wind up here says things." Then he signed off. Normal voice, normal procedure. No one ever spoke to him again, as far as this file is willing to confirm. Section 3. The recovery operation. Day 1. February 10th. The detachment inserted by vehicle to the last plowed point, then moved 11 miles on skis, towing equipment sleds. Visibility under 100 meters. They reached the survey camp at 4:50 in the afternoon, in failing light. The camp was intact. I want to be precise about what intact means in this report, because the detachment commander was precise about it in his statement. Both tents standing and staked, stove fuel full, firewood split and stacked under a tarp. 14 days of food, present, sealed, untouched. The detachment inventoried it. Not one meal was missing, not one wrapper in the burn barrel. 4 sleeping bags, laid out, zipped open, empty. 4 sets of snowshoes, racked outside the tent door. The men were gone, and they had walked into a blizzard, at night, in -20 degrees, without their snowshoes, away from their food. The detachment found the first trail almost immediately. 4 sets of boot prints, leaving camp together, in single file, heading northeast. Deeper into the parcel, away from the road. The prints were evenly spaced. Nobody was running, nobody stumbled. 4 men walked out of a warm camp into a whiteout like they were walking to a meeting. The detachment commander made a note in his log that first night. It is quoted in this file without comment. Trail discipline better than ours. Day 2, February 11th. The detachment split into 2 6-man teams and followed the trail northeast. The prints held their spacing for over 2 miles. Through drifts, over deadfall, up a grade that the detachment on snowshoes with training took 40 minutes to climb. Then, at a frozen creek bed, the trail changed. 3 sets of prints continued northeast. 1 set turned around. The returning trail belonged, by boot size, to the trainee, the 22-year-old. His prints headed back toward camp for about 400 meters. Then they stopped. They did not scatter. They did not show a fall or a struggle or a drag mark. The report uses the phrase terminal print. The last 2 boot prints were side by side, weight even, facing back the way he came, facing the 3 men still walking away from him. And then there were no more prints, in any direction, in snow deep enough to swallow a man to the waist. The detachment spent 3 hours on that spot. They probed the snow. They gridded 50 meters in every direction. Nothing under the snow, nothing in the trees above. The trainee's trail simply ends, and this file offers no explanation, because the people who wrote this file did not have one. At 3:40 that afternoon, the second team found the crew chief. He was seated at the base of a white pine, 4 miles from camp, facing northeast. He was frozen through, and he had been dead, by the coroner's estimate, 4 to 5 days. Here is the detail that moved this incident out of normal channels and into this archive. The crew chief left camp on or after February 5th. He was found on February 11th. 6 days, at most. A fit man with body fat and winter gear. The coroner's report describes the body as, quote, consistent with terminal starvation of 8 to 12 weeks duration. He weighed 81 pounds. His food was 4 miles away. 14 days of it, sealed, untouched. The report notes one more thing about the crew chief, and then moves on faster than I would like. His face was calm. His gloves were off, folded in his lap, and the snow around the tree, in a circle roughly 9 feet across, was melted down to bare, frozen soil. Nothing had burned there. There was no fire. The ground was simply bare, in the middle of 41 inches of snow, around a man who starved in under 6 days. Night 2. The detachment consolidated and made camp 800 meters from the pine tree. Standard watch rotation. 2 men up at all times. At 11:52 p.m., both men on watch reported hearing a voice in the tree line to the northeast. The report includes their statements separately, taken separately, and the statements match. The voice was calling a name. Not shouting, calling. The way you call someone in from the yard when dinner is ready. Unhurried, familiar. The name it was calling belonged to one of the men on watch. Sergeant First Class, redacted, stated that the voice was, quote, "My mother's voice, no question, not similar, hers." His mother lives in Ohio. He confirmed by satellite phone the next morning that she was home and fine and had been asleep. The second man on watch heard the same voice at the same time, coming from the same tree line. He stated that it was not a woman's voice. He heard the crew chief, whose voice he had never heard in life, but recognized the next day when the detachment played back the logging company's archived radio checks during the debrief. Same voice, same tree line, same moment. Two different men heard two different people. The watch did not wake the detachment. They logged it, kept their sectors, and the voice stopped at 12:31 a.m. The last thing it said was not a name. The last thing it said was, "You brought so much food." Day 3, February 12th. The two remaining surveyors were found at 9:15 in the morning, 7 miles from camp, in a stand of black spruce so dense the detachment had to remove their snowshoes to enter. I am going to read this part the way the file writes it. Flat. Because the file is right to write it that way. Surveyor 1 was found at the base of a spruce, in the same seated posture as the crew chief. Same weight range, same starvation findings, same circle of bare, snowless ground. Surveyor 2 was found 40 feet away, vertically. He was lodged in the upper third of a spruce tree, 61 feet above the ground, folded into the branches, facing down, toward the seated man. The branches below him, between the ground and his position, were intact, unbroken, snow undisturbed on every bough. The report states that recovering him required a climbing team and 4 hours, and that the branches had to be cut away around the body because the body had not been placed among the branches. The tree had grown around him. The detachment's medic, a Special Forces 18 Delta with 2 combat tours, examined both men at the site. His full findings are in the medical annex, and I'll get there. But his field note from that morning is in the main body of the file, and I think the filing agent put it there deliberately. It reads, "I have seen bodies in trees. Blast, wind, water. This is none of those. Trees take years to do this. He has been gone 1 week. I am requesting we consolidate and move to extract." The request was approved at 11 a.m. The detachment never got the chance. Section 4. Contact. At 2:20 in the afternoon on February 12th, as the detachment prepared the 2 recovered bodies for transport, the junior weapons sergeant, Staff Sergeant Redacted, reported movement in the spruce stand to the northeast. The detachment took up positions. 12 men, all combat veterans, all facing the same 50 meters of trees. For 9 minutes, per the log, nothing moved. Then it stood up. Every man's statement was taken separately within 72 hours, and this file reconciles them into one description, which I will read as written. Height estimated between 9 and 11 feet when fully upright. Build described as, quote, "starved past the point a living thing can be starved." Skin gray, pulled tight, torn at the joints. The head is described inconsistently. 4 men said elk, 3 said deer. 2 said it was a man's head, wrong in a way they could not name. 3 declined to describe the head at all, and the interviewing agent did not press them, which tells you something about how those interviews went. Every statement agrees on 2 points. It was looking at them, and it smelled like a meat locker with the power out. All 12 men reported the smell. Several reported it before the movement, from 200 meters, upwind. The detachment commander gave the order to hold fire. The thing in the tree line stood still for a further 2 minutes. Then it spoke. It used the commander's voice, his own voice coming back at him from the trees, and it repeated, word for word, in his cadence, the radio transmission he had sent to state headquarters an hour earlier, including the grid coordinates, including his men's names. Then it turned sideways and was gone. No sound. 11 feet of starved gray anatomy, and not one branch moved, and the snow where it had stood when the detachment cleared the stand 20 minutes later was melted to bare ground. In a shape, the report includes a sketch of the shape. The caption under the sketch is one word: kneeling. Night 3, February 12th into the 13th. The detachment's last night in those woods. After the contact at the spruce stand, the commander pulled his men back 2 miles toward the road and stopped at dusk, rather than risk moving injured sleds through deadfall in the dark. They built one fire, large, deliberately large. The log states the fire was authorized, quote, for morale and illumination, which is the Army's way of writing down that 12 armed men wanted light between themselves and the trees. Nobody slept. The file establishes this quietly in the medical annex of all places, where the detachment's post-mission screenings note 12 men, 0 hours of sleep, and no one, in any interview, willing to say whose decision that was. It wasn't ordered. It wasn't discussed. 12 men lay in their bags with their eyes open, and every statement uses some version of the same word: waiting. At 2:47 in the morning, the smell arrived. The men on watch didn't report it because there was no need. Every statement describes the same moment. The fire was upwind. The smell came through it anyway, like the wind was a suggestion it had declined. And then the footsteps started. The statements agree that the steps stayed just past the firelight. Never seen. Slow. Patient. Circling. And here's the part the interviewing agent made 3 separate men repeat because he did not believe his notes. The gait changed as it walked. For a stretch, the steps were 4-legged, a heavy animal, hooves punching through crust. Then, without pausing, 2-legged, a man's stride. Then 4 again. The commander, who has hunted his whole life, stated that no elk walks its own length in snow that deep without breathing loud enough to hear. He heard the steps for over an hour. He never heard it breathe once. At one point, one of the junior sergeants, the statements do not say which, and I suspect that is a kindness, took a burning length of wood from the fire and stood up to throw it toward the sound. The man next to him caught his arm and said one word: don't. Asked later why, the second man's statement says this: you don't throw food off the porch and then act surprised. He was asked what he meant by food. The word firewood is right there. He was holding firewood. His answer is recorded. I know what I said. The steps stopped at 4 o'clock exactly. Not trailed off. Stopped, mid-stride, the way a tape stops. At first light, the detachment walked the perimeter, and this file includes the point man's sketch of what they found. A single line of prints circling the camp at the exact edge of where the firelight would have reached. The circle is nearly complete, 340 degrees. It stops 6 feet short of closing, and the gap in the circle faces northeast, as if something had walked all the way around them all night and left the door open in the one direction it wanted them to look. And the prints themselves. They begin on the western side as hooves. They end at the gap as bare human feet, small ones. The report gives the measurement, and then, 2 pages later, gives the same measurement again in a different context and lets you do the arithmetic yourself. The bare footprints match the boot size of the trainee, who, 3 hours later, was sitting on their extraction route, northeast, in the gap, waiting to be found and asking, politely, whether anyone had anything to eat. Section 5. Recovery of the survivor. The detachment began movement to extract at first light on February 13th. Day 4. They moved as one element, bodies on sleds, weapons distributed, no one at the tail of the column for more than 10 minutes at a time. The commander's log entry that morning is 3 sentences. All personnel accounted for. Morale holding. No one has eaten since the 12th, and no one will say why. Hold that sentence. I'll come back to it. At 10:35 a.m., 4 miles from the road, the point man stopped the column. There was a figure ahead, on the trail, sitting in the snow. It was the trainee, the 22-year-old, the one whose boot prints ended in the middle of a field 2 days earlier. He was alive. He was sitting upright in negative 18 degrees, in shirt sleeves, no coat, no gloves, no boots, 8 days after walking into a blizzard, and he was alive. He knew his own name. He knew the year. He recognized the guard uniforms, and he asked, politely, in a level voice, whether anyone had anything to eat. The medic reached him first. The medic's statement says that when he lifted the trainee to the stretcher, he staggered. Not from weight, from the absence of it. The trainee was 5'10". At the hospital, on a calibrated scale, witnessed by 2 physicians and 1 state trooper, he weighed 19 pounds. I'm going to let that sit exactly as long as the file does, which is 1 line of white space. And then the file continues, because files always continue. He should not have been able to sit upright. At that weight, there is not enough of a person left to run a heartbeat. The physician's notes use the word impossible 4 times. Doctors do not write that word. There are procedures against writing that word. The trainee was carried the remaining 4 miles. He was calm the entire way. He made small talk about the weather. He asked each man carrying his stretcher, individually, by name, whether they had anything to eat. He knew all 12 names. Nobody had told him. Section 6, Medical Annex, summarized for the record. The trainee was admitted to redacted Regional Medical Center on the evening of February 13th under a name that is redacted even in the annex, which is not standard practice, and then transferred within 19 hours to a federal facility this file identifies only by a routing code. The annex covers the 6 days that followed. His body temperature on admission was 98.6. Exactly. It never varied, not by 1/10 of a degree, at any hour, on any instrument. The annex notes, dryly, that healthy human beings do not do this. He was fed. That was the mistake, though I do not know what else they could have done. Over 6 days, under supervision, the trainee consumed a documented 41,000 calories. Liquid nutrition, then solids, then, per the log, anything permitted, and several things that were not. Staff notes describe him as courteous, cooperative, articulate, and, quote, always hungry, in a way that stopped being medical and started being difficult to be in the room with. Over those same 6 days, his weight went from 19 pounds to 17. The food went somewhere. The annex is clear on that. His body processed everything. It simply did not keep any of it. And the physics of where 41,000 calories went is a question the annex raises once, in a footnote, and never again. On the 5th day, a nurse recorded the only statement he ever made about the mountain. It is the audio recording attached to this file. 14 minutes, 6 seconds. Most of it is silence, and the sounds of the ward. At the 11-minute mark, unprompted, the trainee speaks. It doesn't take you when you're hungry. It takes you when you're full, when you're warm and fed and you stop listening. Hunger is how you know you're still yours. That is the last thing he said to anyone. On the 6th day, February 19th, at 3:11 in the morning, the trainee expired. Terminal weight, 19 pounds, the same 19 to the ounce. Time of death is precise because he was on a cardiac monitor, and the monitor recorded his heart stopping at 3:11. It also recorded the 90 seconds prior. The annex describes this page of telemetry as sealed under separate cover and does not describe it further, except to note that for those 90 seconds, the monitor was reading 2 heartbeats. Section 7. Status of recovery personnel. Annotation, Dr. Tales. Before I read this section, I want to point at something the file itself never points at. I told you to hold a sentence. The commander's log, morning of day 4. No one has eaten since the 12th, and no one will say why. I went through this file 3 times. There is a supply annex, It lists rations issued, rations consumed, by day, for the whole operation, because the Army counts everything. Days 1 and 2, normal consumption, 12 men. Days 3 and 4, 0. 12 Special Forces soldiers, working in negative 20 degrees, burning 6,000 calories a day, ate nothing for the final 48 hours of that operation. Not one of them discussed it. Not one of them was ordered to stop. 12 men, independently, silently, stopped eating on the same afternoon their food was 200 meters downwind of that spruce stand. And the trainees' words in that hospital bed. Hunger is how you know you're still yours. I don't think they were losing their appetite. I think, on some level below language, 12 very well-trained men understood what appetite meant in those woods. And they set theirs down like a loaded weapon. Nobody in this file connects those pages, so I am connecting them. Annotation ends. The detachment was debriefed and released to their home stations on February 21st. 11 of the 12 remain in service as of the filing date. The 12th, Staff Sergeant Redacted, the man who first spotted movement in the spruce stand, separated from the guard in April 2019. His exit paperwork cites family reasons. His statement is the last one in the file, given voluntarily, 8 weeks after the incident, at his own request. He drove 200 miles to give it. It is one paragraph. He states that since February 12th, he has been unable to feel full. Not unwilling, unable. He eats, the food is fine, his weight is stable, his labs are normal. But the sensation of having eaten enough is gone. He described it as, quote, a door in me that used to close, and now it doesn't. He asked the interviewing agent one question at the end of his statement, and the agent recorded it, and no answer is recorded after it. He asked, how far behind me can it hear my stomach? Section 8. Disposition and case status. The deaths of the crew chief and both surveyors were ruled exposure. The death of the trainee was ruled complications of severe malnutrition. All 4 rulings were issued by the same office, on the same day, and every finding in this file that contradicts them was routed here instead of there. That is what this archive is for. The timber parcel was withdrawn from the logging contract in March 2019 under a land management reclassification. The parcel is closed to entry. The stated reason is habitat protection. The file notes that the closure order specifies no end date, and that the boundary of the closed area does not follow the timber parcel. It follows the tree line. Case file 0692 was marked inactive on March 11, 2019. Cross-reference, file 0214, regarding a similar consumption anomaly, referred to in 3 places in this document and not present in this archive. The reference slip for file 0214 is in the drawer. The file is not. The slip is stamped checked out. There is no name on the line. Addendum to file 0692. Dated November 2nd, 2019, 8 months after filing. Unsigned. The addendum is 1 page, typed, and consists of a summary of a state police report from October 2019. A hunter, legally in the forest adjacent to the closed parcel, reported hearing a voice calling from inside the closure boundary at dusk. A young man's voice, calm, polite. The hunter states the voice asked 3 times whether he had anything to eat. The hunter, being from that county, and being, in his words, raised right, did not answer, did not look toward the voice, and walked out of the woods facing forward the entire way. The addendum's final line is not part of the police summary. It is typed in a different font, added by whoever filed the addendum, and it is the reason this file has a handwritten warning on its cover. It reads, voice analysis of the hunter's phone recording returns a match. The voice is the trainee's. The recording also returns a second result, underneath the first, at low confidence. The second voice is yours. There is no indication in the file of who yours refers to. The addendum is unsigned. Annotation, Dr. Tales. I said at the top of this reading that there is a handwritten note on the cover of this file. Do not play the recording alone. I want to be honest with you about something, because you have sat with me this long and you have earned it. I played the recording alone. 14 minutes, 6 seconds. I listened to all of it before this reading, in this room, with the door shut. Because that is my procedure, and procedure is what keeps an archivist from becoming a filing error. The trainee speaks at the 11-minute mark. You heard what he says. But my copy of the recording runs 14 minutes and 40 seconds. 34 seconds longer than the duration listed on the cover sheet of this file. And in those last 34 seconds, which appear in no transcript, in no annex, in no page of this document, someone in that hospital room asks a question. The voice is level, courteous. It asks, is he reading it out loud? Annotation ends. This file has been read into the record. I'm Dr. Tales. Next case pending.